Hi, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen, Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Welcome, everyone. This is really an exciting night. We have done a lot of webinars. We do usually two a month, but this topic has clearly touched a nerve. And I'm really excited. When I last checked, we had 907 people register for the webinar. We've just begun and we already have close to 200 people already here, and people are continuing to filter in. So clearly, this is a topic of great interest to people, and I'm really excited to have expert panelists here with Greg and Sarah. So our topic tonight is 7 ways to reduce the cost of college, regardless of your income. So no matter whether you're a very high earner or on the other end of the spectrum, there are ways that you can keep the cost of college down. And I've, of course, helped many students with this process over the years, but I'm often doing it from a somewhat theoretical perspective. Greg and Sarah have been in on the front line, working in financial aid offices, understanding things, and working on this specific problem for more than 2 decades. So we're super excited to have you. So welcome once again, Greg and Sarah.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And while we're waiting for people to show up, I wanted to do this Menti. So this is a really cool thing when you have a big group like this. Some of you have been to our webinars before, have probably seen it. So let me I guess I have to escape out of this to copy the link. Why is this? Huh. Sorry, control. There we go. All right. I'm going to let me go over to Menti myself and get this started. You can scan that QR code and then we'll present it live in a moment. Um, so hopefully people are getting into there. Um, Here we go. Okay. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
So this is a pretty cool site. So you can go to menti.com and then enter this code 17193882, or just scan the QR code if you're on a device that's capable of doing that. And this is going to be a chance for us to get to know a little bit more about the crowd that we have here, the makeup of it, and then some of your sort of questions that you might have around this that will help us steer this conversation to make it as useful as possible. So I see about 40 people are joining now. In droves, we have over 50 people now, although we have 220 here. So you don't have to do this, but I think you'll enjoy it. I don't know if usually there's a way to invite by link, but uh, there we go. This will help. I'm gonna drop this in the chat for everyone. Um, so if you're struggling to find it, you can just go there, click that in the chat that I just dropped in. But it seems like a lot of people are here. So we're gonna get going with this. So where are you tuning in from? Okay, so this gives us a sense of where people are in the world. If you are not in the United States or Canada, I suppose you can sort of see Canada there. Then you can choose Alaska, this big, oh, thing down in the lower left. If you're international and so on. But this is all interesting. So I saw the registrations. There were a lot from Texas. Actually overtook Massachusetts towards the end of the day, and that's where we had the most registrants, over 100 from Texas. But then we do have quite a few from the West Coast, but they seem to be a late arriving crowd, as we're used to with our West Coast brethren. So great. Let's keep on going. The next one is, where is your family originally from? So this is always really an interesting one with a predominantly Muslim crowd, just to get a sense or of where people are from. I would be actually I am the UK one, as someone whose ancestors came over on the Mayflower. Quite literally, that's my origin. But obviously, for most of the people in our audience, come from different parts of the world. So we're seeing a lot from the Indian subcontinent, India and Pakistan. Some from the Arab world. Looks like Nigeria is well represented. And some other places. Always really interesting. And we only have people. I see people using the chat as well. If you're able to uh uh go into the actual Menti, then we'll see things live all together. But it's cool that you're putting things in the chat as well, and I'll try to look at those as well. It's hard to see everywhere all at once. Let's go to the next question. What are the ages of your children? So let's see how people are. So Greg and Sarah, you can see we have a pretty mixed crowd. We have a lot of people not just in the high school and college age, but we have a lot of the younger crowd here. Look at those preschool people. This is really early early college prep. And you can see all the things coming through in the chat as well, with the different ages. So this gives us a sense of who's here in this big crowd that we have tonight. Let's go here. So, in one or two words, what's your biggest worry about paying for college? So, these are coming in. This is a word cloud. So, as you type words, the words that come up again and again are going to be larger and larger. So, we're seeing debt, cost, tuition, money, affordability, scholarships, not enough financial aid. A lot of people. That's a whole phrase. So we can see that, and then we have a lot of other ones: expensive, riba, which means interest. And interest comes up as well. I think Greg and we were having a good conversation about that earlier today. Um, everything I see on the side. So there's definitely some angst here. I think that's why we had 900 people register for this. But you can see, your fears are pretty similar to everyone else's fears, and this is why we are running this today, to try to bring some level of uh, ease to this. All right, which of these sounds the most like you? I have not clicked the button yet, so the answers haven't come up quite yet. But I make too much to qualify for aid, but not enough to pay for all my kids. That's a pain point we've heard quite a lot. A fear that your income's too high to qualify for need-based aid, but you have 4 or 5 kids, and you don't really see how you're finding the money for that. I honestly have no idea what college costs or how any of this works. You're totally at the beginning, and this is like tabula rasa. Like, you don't know what's going on here. We're a single income household or a low income household, and I don't see how college is possible without loans. Okay, so some people might be feeling like that. I can probably pay for college, but I want to be strategic and not overpay. So maybe, yeah, alhamdulillah, we have the income that we can cover this, but who wants to spend extra money? And I can't figure out a halal savings strategy. I can't figure out a way to save for this in a halal way. And so I've been avoiding the whole topic, putting my head in the sand and so on. So let's reveal the answers. Uh, oh, you reveal the answer. Oh, show responses. So looks like some interesting ones. So about 30% in that category. No idea, 17%. The 27% saying lower income family, just really not sure how they're gonna make it all work. 20%, can probably handle it, but want some strategies to keep their costs low. And then a small handful in that last bucket. So really interesting. Good for us to get a sense of, who's here and what the things are. All right. How confident do you feel about your family's plan to pay for college? Ooh, someone found the little heart button down here, the like button. So that usually gets a little chaotic once everyone finds that. But so how confident do you feel? So we can see we already have 78 answers. So I think we have a statistically significant. The top one you can see, this is the zero level, so that's the biggest one, and we have very few people at that 9 or 10 level. So overall 3.6. So pretty interesting, and we can see where the anxiety is coming from. And then what's the single biggest source of stress? Um, Understanding financial aid, not so much. Saving enough money and time. Avoiding interest-based loans. So that was something that came out in a lot of the questions that we were getting, and something that I can also speak towards, since it's maybe more community specific. Knowing which colleges are worth the cost. Okay, so a few people said that. And then finding scholarships my child could get. That seems to be the winner there, in terms of this. So thank you so much. You even if you haven't answered every single question, you can keep answering them. And I do have some people in the chat on my team. Ruhina, who just wrote there, is actually my wife and confidant and assistant. So she's sharing some things that, yes, this is recorded and will be shared, and so on. So with that said, let me end this part of the presentation and get back into the slides that I had before. Um, so that gives us a good baseline. Anything stand out to you, Greg or Sarah, from what we just saw? Is that similar to what you're seeing in with other families you've worked with?
Very much so. Yeah, no, this is very typical and stressful. Paying for college is the number one. It's a big factor for many families. So you're not alone and trying to understand this. I think that's it's a pretty common theme, and we'll try to address a number of those tonight.
Great. So I always like to start with a quick prayer. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya Allah, Ya Ali, please put khair and barakah in this gathering. Please allow us to fulfill the rights of everyone who's come here. Ya Allah, we've tried to we're trying to please you in the way that is best, in the way that is best. So please make it easy. Make it easy for us to pay for college for our children. You widen our rizq, so it's easy for us to do this. You open up the halal means for us to support our families, and you make these things easy, and you reward Greg and Sarah for taking time out of their busy lives to share their expertise with us. And please give us all tawfiq wa akhir dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Um, Okay. So just basic housekeeping. Inshallah, we're scheduled for 90 minutes. So we're gonna try to really finish by 9 Eastern time. So the chat where you guys are giving your amens and so on, um, and is a great place to put commentary and stuff. And so on. Please don't spam the chat. We've had a few issues with that in the past. Don't just like keep sending the same thing again and again. There's a separate function, however, the Q&A function, which is really important, and you should try to find that right now. We already have one question in there. That's where you want to put questions that we can answer. So while Greg is speaking, Sarah's going to be in that Q&A and able to answer questions live, and he can tell you more about this and so on when he speaks. But the more questions that we get there, like we have so many people here, we're not going to be able to address hundreds of questions live. But if you put them there, then we can address them, and then a few of them will probably rise to the point where we probably do want to talk about them live because it's really relevant for everyone. If something resonates, you can put the exclamation points or use the heart reaction. Do you guys know where the heart reaction is? Let's see some hearts come up. See if you can find that. Um, there they come. Nice. I like that. It's sometimes, sometimes I'm all alone on these Zooms. At least now I have Greg and Sarah, some other faces to look at. But when we see that, we know we're doing a good job. And, especially for Greg, new to our community, we want to show him some love and so on. I think you can upvote questions as they come in. And if we do hit capacity, we are live streaming this on YouTube, so you can find our YouTube channel. But it looks like we have about 300 here. We'll see. We'll see. We have a capacity of 500, and we'll see how that goes. So the order of events, we've already done the first few things, menti and the dua. I'll talk a little bit about myself in Five Before College because we have some people who are brand new to our world. Then we'll meet Greg and Sarah, and then the heart of the presentation is Greg's discussion there with Sarah answering questions. At the end, I will talk a little bit about our core program, Find Your Qibla, and some of the stuff we do. And then for those questions that have sort of really risen to the top that we can answer a few of them. We'll do that with the live Q&A. So just very briefly about myself, I know a lot of you are familiar with me. I've been coming to our webinars a lot, but we always have a lot of brand new people, especially with such a big audience like this. So a little background of me, my name is Hamza Henshaw. Alhamdulillah, I became Muslim when I was 15 years old. I describe myself, as I mentioned earlier, as a Mayflower Muslim, both on my mother and father's side. My ancestry goes back to that first ship of pilgrims that came over to the New World. So I really grew up in Boston. I have Boston roots. I went to private school outside of Boston. That's actually where I became Muslim. Went on to Harvard, studied Arabic and Near Eastern languages and civilizations there, and eventually launched a career in education. And I've been in education, I usually say 2 decades, but it's getting closer to 25 years at this point. I've done a lot of different things. One of the most rewarding was working at an Islamic school outside of Boston called Al Noor Academy. And we really put into place a really robust college placement system, and we're able to send many of our students off to Ivy League and top schools like that. And all of our students, found great homes. Eventually, during the pandemic, when I was trying to figure out what's next, I realized that I could only help so many people within the school setting, and so I wanted to create my own thing where I could help sort of the ummah as a whole with this college process because it is one of the big milestones that all of our kids go to. And it's really at the nexus of the things that our community holds most dear. First and foremost, their faith, their children, and then, of course, education. Education is a hallmark of Islamic civilization, and it's really taken off. And alhamdulillah, we've had lots and lots of success and grown from just a one-man show to a team of 8 in just a couple of years. And alhamdulillah, we're lucky to do events like this. Overall, our philosophy here at Five Before College, the reason it's called Five Before College is one, the best time to start preparing for college is not your junior or senior year. And I know some of you may be there, so that's okay. We'll still help you. But the best time is to start well before. And people always ask me, when should we start? So I decided to answer it in the name of the company. So Five Before College, that's really eighth grade. Eighth grade is the time when you can really start thinking about your college profile and getting a little bit more serious. Of course, when we're talking about financing, when we're talking about paying for college, some of you guys who have the kindergartners and the preschoolers are probably in the right place because this is a time where decisions you make 15 years before college can have a huge impact on the opportunities that your kids might have a lot of in the future. Beyond that, we are focused on the five before five hadith. We focus on youth. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Take benefit of five before five: your youth before your old age, your health before sickness, wealth before poverty, your free time before busyness, and your life before death." And this one piece of advice is really very comprehensive. And we've sort of created a whole framework of college prep based on this prophetic guidance. And I won't go into too many details here because I want to make sure to leave space for the main event. But suffice it to be said, what we're trying to do here is help launch people towards success, not just in dunya, not just getting into Ivies and top 20 schools and that, but getting them to success, the real admissions day, which is Yawm al-Qiyamah and the Akhirah and so on. And that's really the goal of Five Before College, helping launch Muslims who can change the world, who are ethical, who are moral, who have that strong foundation, who have the credentials to go off and fix this broken world. Alhamdulillah, it's been really successful. These are some among many, many, many schools that our students have gone off to. And since you joined this, you will have sort of gotten added to our email list. We really put a lot of effort into our email list to keep people informed about events like this and just share. Writing was sort of always my superpower, so I put a lot of effort. So one of the things I still, as founder, do is write those emails a couple times a week and share with all of you. We also have a WhatsApp group. So WhatsApp is the lifeblood of the Muslim community. I would say 75% of the people here joined by clicking a WhatsApp link. This is a WhatsApp community that we have. I started this, a while back. Muslim Path to College #1, it got full, over 1,000 people. Muslim Path to College 2 got full. Muslim Path to College 3 is about halfway there. So, and this is another way. It's not just me speaking. It's a discussion place where you can ask questions and learn from other parents and learn from their experience. It's really helpful. I will drop the link for this into the chat. And oops, that's not the chat. Where is the chat? Here we go. So in case the QR code wasn't working, that's the link for the chat. And I think that's it from my side. I want to thank you for your patience with me. I want to turn it over to our main event to Greg and Sarah. So you're welcome to share your screen and get us going here.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we're excited to be here, and obviously it's a great turnout, and there's a lot to cover. I think that one of the things that is obvious is that from that poll that you did is that a lot of people have different ages, different concerns, and so we're going to try to at least introduce you to a lot of the ideas. There's so much depth and so much information here that we won't be able to get into all of it, but at least to introduce you to, and you can identify for yourself what are those opportunities that you're going to have to make college a little bit more reasonable. So, just a quick introduction. My name is Greg Cohen. I'm the president and founder of a company called Campus Bound. We started it in the early 2000s. I was actually, my mother was doing this out of her home on the South Shore, just out of Boston, and I took over the business in the after I finished up my MBA and have been going it ever since. We have supported and I personally have been involved, and my passion is this financial side of the process and financial aid and helping people to reduce the cost of college. So that's been getting really in the weeds with it all, with helping with financial aid applications and loans and everything else in between. I also have recently experienced what many of you are about to experience, which having two daughters that have just graduated college. So I can truly appreciate. I paid my last college bill about 6 months ago, and it was kind of nice to have done that. And now they're not living in the house, and now my younger one's about to go back to grad school, but we're going to negotiate that with her. I also started a nonprofit organization called College Affordable. It's been great for the last 3 years. We work primarily with high schools within Massachusetts, which is where I'm located, and helping partner with those schools. So this is a real thing for me. Just so you know, if you look for me on LinkedIn, my profile's a little light. We got hacked today. So if you do have want more information about me or Campus Bound, my company, I encourage you to visit the website, and I'll put that up at the end. I'm joined here tonight by, and I'll introduce her for just so she can. Oh, you want to jump in, Sarah? Go ahead.
I was gonna say I could just say hello, but yeah, it's lovely to be here with all of you. I just want to applaud everybody for taking the time. This is really, obviously, you all have put a lot into this community, and Hamza has built this, and it's really quite lovely to see, quite remarkable. But yeah, so I've been at Campus Bound for almost 2 years, but was a counselor there in 2017 as well. But I've been in the financial aid world for strictly for about a decade now, but I've always worked with high school students and with youth, really since I was in high school myself. So this is just a really similar to Greg. This is kind of my passion. I really love helping families navigate the financial aid and financial planning for college, just because it can be so nebulous and complex and frustrating. So it's been really lovely to be that support for our students and our families. So very happy to be here with you all tonight. And I will do my best at the chat. I promise. There are a lot of you, so I'll be typing fast.
Yeah, so the plan as about Campus Bound is, so as I mentioned, it started in 2003. and we help people the whole college process. We're unique in our in the space that we do have this specialized expertise in the financial side of it. And in addition to people like Sarah who have explicit financial aid office experience, we also part with certified financial planners to help people figure out how the best way to save and plan and budget for college. We really pride ourselves in knowing and being in this to understand the different discounting policies and practices at hundreds of colleges. So knowing, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that, about the different policies and procedures that these colleges have, and that ultimately ends up with differences in how much they can that they're going to be able to reduce your tuition costs. We maintain a database of thousands of merit and need-based awards from colleges. So this is what we do. We live it and try to make you allow our clients to become informed customers because with this kind of expense, you need to be. As you've heard, we're use the Q&A function. Sarah's going to answer questions as many as she can during the thing. So there's a lot of content here. It's maybe new to a lot of people, and so no wrong questions. We'll answer what we can in the chat. If there's some, and we'll try to save a little time at the end to go over some live, and we'll cherry pick some. So with that introduction, college is a most unusual investment you're going to make in your lifetime. First of all, it's just the sheer size of it. I've seen some financial aid awards and some tuition for next year coming out, and there's multiple schools I've already seen that are over $100,000 per year. I think that's the first time I've seen it was this year or maybe last year where they cracked that $100,000 per year for full pay. Even your in-state flagship public university, University of Texas, University of Massachusetts, they're about $35,000, $36,000 per year now and going up at a few percent per year. So if you've got multiple children, you could be talking $1 million or more to be able to pay full fare for colleges. And it's not a tangible good. It's the return on this investment that you're about to make is really hard to figure out. If you're investing in some kind of a mutual fund or some kind of property, you can kind of project from year to year over decades how that may fare for you. But you can't figure this out. And it's confusing. The cost, even figuring out what the cost is going to be, is confusing. Let alone what the outcome is going to be in the long-term financial success that your student may have. The available data to people going into this process in high school is confusing. They use a lot of acronyms, a lot of averages. So it's really hard to tell what it means for you. And really, that's the important thing. You are also about to make this investment, and you don't find out how much it's really going to cost until the very end, until your student is about to decide where they're going to go. So of all the many, many colleges we have here in the United States, they've got their sticker price, their original price, but most students don't pay that. But you don't know what your bill is going to look like for sure until those decisions come in. So you have to narrow it down from thousands to several to apply to, and then ultimately where the student gets into and picking one. But you don't know those true costs until about this time as a senior, April 1st of your senior year of high school, where you want to know what their offers are and therefore what your actual costs are going to be. When you go to a store to buy a piece of paper or a phone, the price is right there. You can see what it's going to cost. But this, they kind of hide the discounts until the end, which is really unusual. And I think the other part of this is it's an emotional decision. It's an emotional purchase. There's a 17-year-old with their own opinions and their own peer influences that are in this. You've got your own biases from your lifetime, and there's a deadline. When you're thinking about retiring, you can look at your investments and you can say, well, maybe I'll work another year or two because I need to be able to make sure my money lasts until for as long as possible. When your student is a senior in high school, they're going to college next year. Certainly you could take a gap year, you could work for a year, do some alternatives, but most high school seniors that are going to four-year colleges are doing it right when they graduate high school. So that first bill is going to come sometime the summer before they go off to school. And there's going to be another one and another one and another one throughout college. So you have to be prepared for this really hard deadline. You can't procrastinate this. So you could decide if you want to buy a new car, you could say, you know what? I don't have the money for that right now. I'll fix up the one I have for a little bit longer. This one, you don't have that as much discretion. There are some strategies, there are some things you can do. So you need to be on top of this. And for the folks on the call that are younger, it's not too late at all to start or too early to start looking at this. Now, when I look at this problem that we have, there's not a one size fits all solution here. There's actually several different avenues that are available that I'm going to go through each of these tonight. It's the budget and saving, it's the need-based aid system, merit scholarships, building a good target list, going through the financial aid application process, appealing for more money, and really being thoughtful about how you pay for college. In all of these, there are opportunities and there are opportunities for mistakes that could be costly. So you really want to be on your game and thinking through each of these elements and where your opportunities lie so that you can be really thoughtful and not pay any more than you have to. So the first thing I want to talk about is saving for college. And I'm speaking to everybody here. Even for those of you that have really young students, the earlier you start, the better you're going to be. But it's never too late, right? So you might say, there's no way my student is a sophomore in high school, a junior in high school, he or she's a good student. I'm looking ahead at these colleges. There's no way I could possibly save that much to pay for what I'm going to need in the near future. Anything more that you can do for savings is going to be less debt later on, or give your student more choices later on. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how the financial aid system works. A lot of people get scared or get concerned that if they're going to see that you've got savings and therefore you won't get financial aid. And that's a bit of a myth. Now, there are many different avenues to save. There's not a one size fits all for that. So a very common thing, especially with families with younger children, is something called a 529 plan. And the core benefit of the 529 plan is that the earnings, the interest, the proceeds from that investment are tax-free if they're used for education. In recent years, they've actually expanded the possible uses for it. So it's not just a tuition bill. It can be used for books or a computer. It can now be used for grad school. It can be used for if you want to send your student to a private high school. These can be used for that. So any educational expenses. They can even be used to pay down loans to a certain degree. There's a UTMA account, which is a Uniform Trust of Minors account. It's another account that's often used for college savings. Roth IRAs, which is a retirement account. But a Roth IRA, you can actually use that tax-free. It works much like a 529 plan if you use it for college. Or you could just use a taxable investment account. And we see this more and more as students get closer to college because you want to have the flexibility of that. And the tax deferral benefits don't go as high. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I could talk about a whole webinar about this. But this is something, if you have a financial planner, if you don't, do your research about it. Or we have ones on our team that could advise you because it's very personal. What investment profile you want to have, how risky you want to be, how many years out your students are for college, tax consequences or opportunities. These are the things that will differ for family to family, student to student, based on your goals and the resources you have. So definitely, I would say consult. As far as I'm going to go with this, there may or may not be implications of financial aid that I'll talk about in a minute. So saving is generally a good thing because the more, the alternatives are debt or not being able to go to as many schools as a school that your student may want to go to. Now, as the college years approach, This is a great time for someone that's got a sophomore or especially a freshman, sophomore, first part of the junior year of high school. It's a time to really get your head around how much can we really afford? Okay, what's my budget? And you have to think about this because of the size of the expense, that there's a ripple effect on this. If you spend too much on college, you'll have less for retirement. There may be debt that you may be facing. You want to think about how you're going to pay for it. You have other children. How are you going to split that money between the children and what's available to them? There may be other goals that you have besides retirement. There may be tax considerations. Sometimes I see people, they say, well, I have this money in my retirement account, my 401k account at work. So I'm just going to use that for college. And my heart, is like, oh, time out, because there'll be taxes on that. There'll be penalties on that potentially. So now you're paying more for college because now you're paying the government as well as the college. So there are different strategies that are available to be efficient. There are different strategies to be available to maximize what you can put away for college. And I've seen it happen both ways when this happens. When somebody sits down as a sophomore or for early junior in high school, or the parents of those students, sometimes people say, I want to spend $70,000 a year on college. And we will look at their retirement. We look at their other needs, their other goals. We say, well, if you spend that much, you're going to have to work until you're 75 years old. Do you want to do that? And they say, okay, well, maybe that's a little too much for us. Maybe what would happen with the growth of our money that continues if I keep the money in my account and only spend $50,000 a year, only $50,000 a year, right? Well, that money that you aren't spending in that family's example continues to grow, and it might allow them to start working a year or two earlier. Now, I've seen it the other way too. People will assume that, well, I only have so much money in my college dedicated savings account. So let's say I have $100,000 in my college savings account. So, okay, well, then I can afford $25,000 for 4 years. But with some looking at it, with some planning, we've seen it where people say, you know what, you're actually okay on your retirement. You could maybe back off putting money into your retirement accounts and dedicate it towards college so that your student will have more opportunities. So people are optimistic and the pessimistic, but this is important for you to establish this. Set the target. And once you've established that target, and I can't stress this enough, start to introduce this concept to your student. A student doesn't want to go through this process only to be surprised and to be told at the 11th hour that you can't afford to pay that. And they can't go to that school. And I got very passionate about this subject about 20 years ago when a student and a family, it was a divorced family, and they didn't want to talk about it with their daughter. And the daughter went along and applied and got excited about a particular very expensive college in the Boston area. And they didn't want to address it. And the parents together who did not get, who had their own personal issues, didn't want to talk about it. But they didn't have the money to be able to pay for that college. But they just went along and let her apply. And she got in. And she was excited. And the aid wasn't sufficient. And they had a choice at that point. In the spring of her senior year, I can either say, no, you can't go, in which case the student will be very upset with her parents, or the family decides, we're just going to find a way to make it work, and we'll take out debt. And ultimately, I think that's what that family decided to do. And that family ended up paying that debt for years. And I'm sure after 10 years after that daughter graduated from college, which I'm sure she had a wonderful experience, they were saying, I'm still writing these checks. And that, was tough. And in fact, in that case, it was a divorce. One person had the means to pay their share of it. The other person did not. So it really became an awkward, difficult situation. So being on the same page, because I use the analogy of if you go to let's say if you go to the grocery store to get your, you go food shopping, and you end up without a list. You have those impulsive emotional purchases when you get to the candy aisle, right? Or the that nice meal they have in the prepared food section. But if you go in with a list, you're very focused and you end up saving money. So having your mind around what you can afford. I even say, you are you going to bring your student to a fancy car dealership if all they can afford is a used car for their first car? So be smart, set the budget. Okay. Now I'm going to get into two of the core ways that you can significantly reduce the cost of college. Now, some are going to be available for some students and some are not, but let's talk about them. The first is need-based financial aid. And there's a complicated formula that goes to this. At its core, they take the cost of the school and they subtract a number called your student aid index. For those of you that have an older student that was in college, or maybe you remember it yourself, this used to be called the expected or estimated family contribution. They changed the name about 3 years ago. The difference between those numbers is your need. That's how much money you're eligible for. And when I say financial aid and how much financial aid you might receive on the need side, it's a combination of grants, which is free money you don't have to pay back, scholarships, same thing, just a little different word. Sometimes they call them awards. Some government loans that are student government loans, which are typically part of the package, and maybe a work study where the student can get a job on campus and pay a little bit. The college is the group that decides who gets what money and how much and what that mix is. So let me put some numbers around this. Two different colleges, same family. One college has a price tag. When I say cost of attendance, I'm talking about tuition, fees, room and board or food, some budget for books and incidental expenses, maybe a little bit of travel expenses. That's the cost of attendance. So one is a relatively expensive private college. Another one is a public in-state flagship, meaning university of this. There might be some regional state schools that may be a little bit less in your state. In this family, in this example, the student aid index is 30,000. So the difference is $60,000 at the private school and $5,000 at the public university. The first phase of that they're giving is the government loan. $5,500 is typically the first step in that. You don't have to take this loan, but it's part of the package. Now, at the public university, they've met your full need. They gave you $5,500 in that government loan, $5,000 in need. There's no discounting happening there on need. So you're paying the $35,000. But look what happens at that school that's got some resources. They say, we're going to give you not only a work study, we're going to give you $49,000 in grants and scholarships. We're going to meet 95% of your need. Now, there are schools that meet 100% of the need, and there are schools that don't meet nearly 95%. But if you look at, let's just subtract the cost of the school minus the free money. Now the cost of that school is $40,500 in this example, which is only $5,000 more per year, even though their starting price is $55,000 difference. So, and if your student aid index is lower, it may even be that the private college is less expensive than the public colleges. Private colleges typically have more money than the public universities. If your SAI is $70,000, then the need on the expensive school here is only $20,000. You might get some grant money, but it's still going to be more expensive, significantly more expensive than the public university. All right. Hopefully that illustrates it well. So what you should be asking yourself is, what is my SAI? Do I have the potential to be eligible for need-based grants, especially when you get to the point later on in high school where your student is starting to target the schools. So what goes into the student aid index? The first key variable for most families, this is the biggest weight in the formula, is your income. And it starts 2 years before the student's going to college. So for those of you that have a student that's going to school in fall of 2026, when you fill out the financial aid forms, they looked at your 2024 income. And then when you go for the sophomore year, but you reapply for aid every year, they're going to be looking at 2025 for the 27-28 school year. Okay. There's a range and there's a lot of nuance to the formula. Student income, but just in general, just to give you a feel, for the lower the income, the smaller percentage they take of it. The higher the income, the higher percentage. It's roughly, after some exemptions and some different caveats they have in the formula, for most families, about 20 to 25% of your adjusted gross income goes towards your student aid index. So if you have a family income of $150,000 adjusted gross, just from that element alone, your student aid index is about 30,000. So it's a big chunk after tax. Student's income. If a student has a job, maybe they work at the grocery store or they work at a restaurant. If they take a big chunk of that, usually what the students have earned is a little less. But I had a student I was helping earlier today. She made $9,000. She worked 2 jobs in high school. Well, that hurt her chances for aid by a few $1,000s, which seems unfair. And, you should reward the students that are working hard, right? Parent assets do count, and that includes 529 plans. So if you've got money that you have a 529 plan, which is a college savings account, for the benefit of the minor, they will take a look at that. Same with a dollar in the bank. If you have certain student assets, they count. But there's some really nuance to these things. First of all, for money that you've got like in a bank account or money in a college savings account, only 5% of the value of that goes towards your student aid index. So it's only reducing, if you have $100,000 in college savings accounts, it's only reducing your eligibility by $5,000. And with the federal formula, and then I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit here. There are 2 sets of formulas. It's only the money that's in the student, where the student is the beneficiary now. So maybe you have 2 kids, but all the money's been saved in the 529 plan of the younger student. It won't affect the older student's application. Now, certain schools, they do count it still, and it gets complicated there. All right. Now, there are real differences between these colleges. There are about 200 to 250 private colleges, particularly the ones that are more selective private colleges. So your Ivy League schools, your NESCAC schools like Tufts and Bowdoin, Stanford and Johns Hopkins. They are going to still give consideration for having multiple children in college at the same time. It's a family metric. It used to be all schools would give you credit for having multiple kids in college, but the federal government changed the formula a couple of years ago, and they don't give credit for that anymore. So, in the person I was talking to earlier today, they've got a second child coming a couple of years later, and we were projecting how much money that student would get. We said, well, the first year you may not get very much, but when your younger daughter goes at that school, you may get more. So some of those schools, if you own a business, they may look at that a little bit differently. Home equity, certain schools look at the home equity, certain schools don't. If you're divorced, there's a very different treatment about non-custodial parents. Some schools don't look at the non-custodial parent, who's a parent that provides less financial support. Those parents aren't even considered in the formula. Other schools will still look at both. If you're remarried, they may look at step parents in different ways. Ability to meet need. Let's say that in my example there, I said that college met 95% of need. That's a good package. Some schools might meet 50 or 60% because they don't have the resources. Out-of-state public universities. Some out-of-state public universities don't give any grant money to non-residents. Some of the southern schools, like Clemson and University of South Carolina or the Florida state schools. If you're from any other state, pretty much, you're not going to get need-based grants from those schools. That's their policy. It's their money for their rules. I know there's a few non-citizens on this. There are some schools that will give need-based aid to non-citizens, but they're not many. Not many. So you really, if you're not a citizen or an eligible non-resident, you may have trouble getting need-based aid. Now you can go for the merit scholarships we'll talk about. And there's a whole host of other factors. So you want to start to really understand what your eligibility, especially as college gets a little closer, and you start to understand what colleges may be on the list, to understand what's my eligibility for aid at those particular colleges, because there are going to be significant differences. All right, I'm going to take a breath and let people. Any questions that we think, Sarah, that you see there that I should pause and answer, or you should answer, or
No, there are some great ones. I've been trying to keep up with them. Um, a lot of people have good questions about, what if what I think this will segue nicely into your next bit, but what if, okay, I'm not gonna make it for need-based financial aid eligibility. Is it even worth it? What are the other routes I can take? Um, and that's, that those
okay,
are kind of some of the
perfect.
trends I'm seeing. So leads
Right.
us nicely into merit scholarships.
Yeah, exactly, right. Because so that's the avenue is merit. And so let's get into that. Help potential help for all.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can I ask you one more thing? Sorry,
Yep.
I was like, I know there's two I wanted to bring up. Folks have been, asking, well, how can I tell what my SAI is? Like, I'm just supposed to make it up. So I did send the government calculator. There are some helpful SAI student aid index calculators out there, and then I'm not sure if we're going to talk about net price calculators at all, but maybe we can briefly mention them as well. But I think that probably the federal student aid one is a good place to start, just if somebody's looking for a quick and easy, general guide to what their SAI is. Do you have any other recommendations?
No, I agree. So that's going to give you a baseline. So if you
Yeah.
put your numbers in there, they're very quick to do. You're going to put your income in there, your savings in there, a little bit of personal information. It doesn't get reported anywhere. These are calculators that are just, they're out there, right? Don't give your name when you're doing these calculators. There's no need to. But you should be able to get through this in 5 minutes. If you see that your student aid index is 100, 120, 140,000, I think that's going to answer your question. It
Mhm.
gets interesting if it's much lower than that. If it's less than the cost of some of these schools, then you're going to want to dig a little deeper. And one of the ways that you can dig a little deeper, and I'll just pick up on this, is something called each college is required by law. This passed maybe 10 years ago. I think it may be even longer now at this point, to have on their website something called a net price calculator. And the intent of these was to give families a read of what your eligibility might be at that particular college. Okay. So, um, because some schools, like I was saying before, look at the house and so forth. Now, some of these calculators are not very good. You'll see calculators out there and they'll say, oh, based on the 2018, 2019 year, the school hasn't updated it in 8 years, right? Or it may be that they're just so simplified, you're thinking that really isn't going to be very valid for me. One of the things that we do at Campus Bound is we do a free consult for you. So if you wanted to have a conversation with us and just say, and give us some basic numbers, Sarah and I have been doing this for a long time. Some of the other people on our team, we can tell you in 10 questions whether or not it's in the cards for you. And if you give us more information, we can get more specific for you. Um, so,
Yeah, could and definitely one of the things that with the families that we work with is we have people like Greg, well, Greg himself, as a resource that our families get to meet with when they're trying to tackle this financial piece because it is, everyone's situation is very much their own and unique and this big picture advice is very helpful, but I'm sure some of you are chomping at the bit to like get into your own specifics. And that's why, we have this partnership with Greg and other people. So definitely for people who are looking for that type of support, we'll give you the good information about how to get the support that you need.
Thank you. So let's talk about what everybody can do to make a difference. And this has become a very big trend in college admissions, is colleges realize that because of the archaic, unrealistic nature of that financial aid formula, that they need to come up with another way to discount the tuition. They love to show a high price because they feel that it gives a perception of high value, right? Or maybe they find some students that were willing or unable to pay it that full price. But the majority of students don't pay that, and they even ones that have no financial need. And what they do is they need to do this to meet their enrollment goals. If they were trying to charge everybody that wasn't need eligible full price, people wouldn't go. They need to give these discounts in order to make it so that it's more possible. And if they can get most of what they're hoping for and a pretty good average, they'll make their budget. So who do they give it to? They give it to students, and they give better packages to students that they find highly desirable. They're in an arms race. They want to get better and better students. And how do they get better and better students? They discount the tuition. They put it on sale, right? And it's all relative to how that student fits in the applicant pool of that particular college. So you might say, my student is not an A+ student with 9 AP classes. They're not going to get anything. That's not true at all. It's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So if your student has B+, and that school usually accepts students with B-, they might give you more money. Or test scores. They usually accept students with 1,300 SATs, and you have a 1,400 SAT. That could be something where you're raising their profile. They're attracting a better student. They're stealing that student from another student school that might be a little bit more selective. Now, sometimes it's driven based on a pure number, GPA or SAT score. Oftentimes, it's based on their holistic review. So when a college is looking at your student applicant, they're looking at a whole host of factors. Grades are an important one. Rigor of the curriculum is an important one, but there's a bunch of different things. And they're evaluating based on their priorities, and they usually have different institutional priorities. They're going to say, "Ooh, in our mind, he's a 9 on a scale of 10, or she's really on an 88 on a scale of 100. We want to attract that student. We're going to discount the tuition." Now, there are some schools that don't give anybody merit scholarships. When you think about Ivy League schools, some of the NESCAC schools, which are schools in New England and the Northeast, like Middlebury and Tufts, they don't give anybody merit scholarships. You could be a perfect student and you're not going to get it. They want to give all their money under the need-based umbrella. So you want to see if merit is where you have to go to make that tuition a little bit less burdensome. You want to see, are they going to give me merit scholarships? Do they even have them? If you get them, they're typically renewable automatically for 4 years, as long as your student maintains a certain grade point average. And usually it's not that high of a grade point average. You get a 2.5 or a 3.0, you keep it. I always love those conversations when the parents come back to me the second year and they say, my son lost his merit scholarship. And we're like, okay, well, now we're going to go to plan B here and tell him he owes you $20,000, right? So make sure they maintain the GPA once they get there. But these are solid money. You could hit the lottery. You could have a banner, you get a big bonus at work. That money's still going to be there. Some colleges are very aggressive. It can be as little as $1,000 for doing a campus visit, all the way up to full tuition. But there may be a trade-off between the selectivity of the school that your student gets into and the cost, right? So so many times a person will come to us this time of year as a senior and say, here are the 8 schools that my student got into. Of course, the one he wants to go to is the one that didn't give him a scholarship. And the family is, like, what do I do? So if cost is going to be way into your decision-making process. A, it's very reasonable because of the cost of college. But have that conversation early. Back to my story about the family didn't want to tell their daughter that she it was not a good financial move. And just like you tell your students and help set their realistic budgets for their other expenses that they have, you can't buy that fancy car or that fancy shirt, right? We're always telling our students we have to balance the cost versus the value. This is the same thing applies here. Now, schools vary widely. And I'm picking on a couple of schools here just to show you this. So Fairfield University in Connecticut, Boston College, obviously in Boston, Massachusetts. Two mid-size Jesuit New England colleges, pretty campuses, both have really good job placement rates with strong starting salaries. I looked this up today. Very close coming out of Boston College versus Fairfield. Both the students love. Over 90% of the students, it's even over 90, I think it's over 93%, go back the second year to these schools. Now, BC is more selective. It's harder to get into Boston College than it is to Fairfield. Fairfield, though, has a lower starting price. And look at this. Fairfield, freshmen without financial need, so people that aren't qualified, 96% of them, almost everybody, gets a merit scholarship. And that average on those are $23,400. So on average, a person that doesn't have financial need is going to Fairfield, 80,000 roughly is their price tag, minus 24, 55,000, mid 50s. Boston College, that same student, only 3% of the students, only the top of the top, get merit scholarships. So you may be looking at full fare, which is over $90,000 at BC. So when you do that math over 4 years, that's a lot of money, right? That's grad school. That's 2 years maybe saving on your retirement, getting you to retirement or avoided debt. If you're going to have to borrow with interest, and it could be 200,000. That just the difference. So there may be that trade-off. Boston College, it's got some perks. They do a great job selling themselves. It's a great institution. Don't get me wrong, it's a great institution, right? But is it worth an extra $125,000 over 4 years? Especially if your student's thinking about graduate school? Now, BC also does a very good job on need-based aid. So if you're qualifying for need-based aid, BC may come down and be less than Fairfield because they do a really good job with that. So understanding what that is, but that's just an illustration there. Now, some people ask about, and people talk a lot about, the billions of dollars that are out there in third-party merit scholarships. So these are scholarships that are provided by your community, maybe an employer, maybe a religious organization. These tend to be the smaller pieces. So they could be as small as $250. And sometimes you see a $2,500 one. Sometimes you see one that's really, really significant. But they are competitive, especially the ones that are like national scholarships. You won't also learn if you got those until right around this time of year as a senior, or May or June. So you're having to make a decision without knowing if you're going to get that scholarship, right? This is something that people don't know. There's a hidden dirty secret in college financial aid. If you're getting need-based aid, a college may displace the need aid that you received when you report these outside scholarships. Not all schools do it, or some might reduce the amount of the debt in the package, but you want to see that. So you need to supposed to report, oh, I won a scholarship from my local chamber of commerce. Great, they say, now you have less need. So we don't have to give you as much. So you just did the college a favor by writing those scholarships. So try to understand what those are. And generally, my rule of thumb is think locally about these versus national. We'll just be less competitive. And when I say local, I mean your community, your state. If there's your employer, we've seen some really good ones from employers, children of employers, of employees get scholarships. Um, if there's an organization, a community organization that you're involved in, you have a higher probability because you're competing against fewer students. If you go for the Coca-Cola scholarship or the Walmart scholarship, you're competing against thousands, and it's hard to differentiate. And these can be merit, they can sometimes they're tied to need as well. All right, a few more slides, and then I'll take a break here. So the college search is such a vital part, and this is where Hamza and his team can really help, is doing the search up front, thinking about what you want, what your priorities are, is vital for getting in and out. I love this quote. It's not about how many people get into the school, the selectivity, but how many people get out. How many graduate in 4 years? Not 6 years, 4 years, right? Because if you're taking a 6 year, you're paying more. If you're transferring, your credits might not transfer, so you're paying more, right? And as you're going through, if you're not thinking about the aid and the scholarships, you might be having to decide, I have to leave that college because we can't afford it anymore. So doing the self-analysis, doing that thoughtful process about what school is going to be a place where my student's going to thrive, they're going to engage, they're going to meet professors, they're going to get involved with activities. That's the recipe for success, and not the hidden costs that come from transferring or dropping out altogether. Talk about the financial aid process. So in the October of your senior year of high school, you'll have to apply for financial aid. There's two major forms that you'll be doing. Everybody does what's called the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, or the FAFSA. I've heard this called the FISA, the FOSA, the FIFSA. It's the FAFSA. They made this form a lot easier than it used to be. I still think it's got some room for improvement the way they've got it set up, but it's much easier. They'll take that tax information, and this is going to be the benchmark that they're going to use to give out the government money at all colleges, and at many schools, their own money. At those 200 or so private colleges, they're going to have a form called the CSS profile. That one's a long form. It's 13 pages long when you print it out. They're going to ask about your home. They're going to ask about other children in much more depth. If you're divorced, there may be a form for the non-custodial parent to fill out. Some colleges may have their own forms. You may have to submit your tax information. Some school times they use a system called iDoc, which is a way to upload your taxes securely. Some schools use their own system. So there's some steps. Seniors, hopefully you've done it. Juniors, 6 months from now, 8 months from now, you'll be doing it. The deadlines can vary, but it's always a good idea to just jump on this. No reason to wait. Now, a question I get a lot of is, if I don't think I'm going to qualify, should I bother to apply? And there's not a blanket answer for that, but I would say, generally speaking, it's worth applying. The FAFSA is free, for one. It is, if you are going to want to have your student borrow some government loan, some loans, the government loan is usually a less expensive loan than private loans. And there's other features about it that are a little bit better. Even if you don't qualify for need-based aid, you can get it. It's called the unsubsidized loan. If something happens to you, let's say you lose your job in this process, or, well, now they have your information in the system and you haven't missed it. So if there's any extenuating circumstances that come up. And then people get worried. They say, if I apply for financial aid, it's going to hurt my students' chances for getting in. And that's a legitimate concern. There are schools that are called need aware, meaning they may look at it. But in our experience, the folks that are affected by that are the ones that have a high need, where there's a big gap, where they're going to have to give them, that SAI is 10,000 and the school costs 90,000, and the college is going to have to give them 70,000 in grants to meet their standards. Yeah, that might give them some pause. But if you're in that situation, you don't want to forgo that just because you think it might have. It's usually at the borders that it comes into play. If you're not eligible, they're going to see that and say, oh, we don't have to give them any need-based grants. We're going to get most of what we want from this student. It could actually help you. Now, two more slides. Colleges will, the awards come in, students get accepted, and sometime after they get accepted, they'll get a merit scholarship potentially with the acceptance letter or shortly thereafter. And then at some point before April 1st of the senior year, they'll get the need-based financial aid award. This is the college has made the decision. And you want to look at these very carefully. These financial aid award letters, there's not a systematic way that all the colleges have to comply with. So you need to interpret them carefully. They might say, oh, well, we're giving you $40,000, but 20,000 of that is loans. Where in other schools, we're giving you 40,000, but it's all in grants, money you have to pay back. So you want to read these carefully and make sure you truly understand what the cost is going to be after the aid package. And this is the thing. It's okay to ask for more. Ask for more merit money or need-based aid money. You want to put together a cohesive argument and do it the right way. This is something we help people to do. There's no risk. And there could be a very nice outcome. I mean, last year, $8,000. So far this year, we're tracking the average appeal is $8,000 more per year. Some people get nothing because the school says, no, we have plenty of students. We don't need you, whatever. Your argument's not good enough. We've had students that have gotten 20, 25,000 on appeal because they've got some extenuating financial circumstances. Sometimes the financial aid forms can't really tell the whole story. So you want to go out there and present the whole story. If you recently lost a job or you've had some, I wrote one today about a student that the family has to do some major unavoidable home improvements. That has a real effect on their finances. That wasn't on the financial aid form. There's no space for it. And the last thing I want people to really think about is how you pay. When it boils down to it, there's only so many different options that you have, right? And you can mix and match between these options. You can hopefully you have some savings, and then if you have savings, you want to think about which savings do I use and when do I use them. If you're fortunate to have a extended family member that's willing to help out, also, when do you use that money? How does that money get used? You want to think about that. There's student parent loans under the student's name, but the lenders have different rates. So you want to be careful about if you do need to borrow either a student loan or a parent loan, think about which lender you use. I'll have people come back to me and say, is there anything I can do this year? Because last year, that loan I got, not through you, not with your help, I'm getting charged 10, 11%. It's like, oh, okay, we got to do better than that, right? So you don't want to just pick the first email you get from a promotional. These lenders are businesses. So you want to be smart about when you borrow, how much you borrow, and not borrow any more than you have to. And then all these colleges are going to have monthly payment plans. So you can say, I want to dedicate, let's say, $5,000 over 10 months, $500 a month without interest. So if you say, I don't have enough to cover in savings, but I could take my student's not home anymore. I can pay a little bit more. I don't have to pay my teenager for food anymore, right? Their food. It's going to the college. So you'll reallocate that. But really be thoughtful about it. Interest rates can vary. Who is responsible for the loans, your investments and their future growth, taxes. It could even affect your future financial aid if you are getting need-based aid. So just take a pause and think about it, because even saving 1% interest on a 10-year loan for $10,000 is money that you can avoid if you just be wise about it. All right. So my key takeaways, and then I'll give it a rest for a couple minutes. Just know there are multiple avenues to reduce the cost of college. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You need to investigate what opportunities you have. Colleges are different. So some colleges are going to be financial aid friendly, some are not. And we can, we certainly Campus Bound can help you with that process. But the goal is figure out your budget, how you're going to pay for it, pick those colleges and pursue the financial aid options that are available to you. And hopefully you can get to a spot where you're sitting here in the spring of the senior year saying, I can make this work. with minimal debt or no debt. Okay, and that makes up a financial fit. So with that, um, I'll stop for a moment, and we can take care of any questions, or Hans, if you want to jump in, feel free to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much. And some people were asking for your contact info, so here it is on the thing. I actually I put your direct email. I don't know if I should be doing that, but in the
That's
chat as
fine.
well.
That's fine.
So yeah, if people want have more specific questions. There have been a lot of questions, obviously we're just talking a lot about debt and interest and things like that. And as we were discussing earlier today, that's sort of a hot button topic within our community in particular. And it makes this whole process even more fraught. And so, earlier there were some questions about 529s, for example. We have a lot of younger families here. So this is sort of an unusual gathering in the sense that, we're not just talking to high school parents. There are families here with younger kids. And so, you know, with 529, some of the people are asking, are they halal? Are they Sharia compliant? And so, and you can certainly correct me if I misspeak in any way, but 529 plans are offered by states, and there are different profiles of what the 529 may consist of. And some of them are, a mixture of bonds and equities. Some of them change as you get closer to actually going into college, where they're a little bit riskier and more equities based early on when the kids are young, but then they get safer and safer, so the money stays, and so on. And then there are all equities portfolios. So obviously bonds are very, very problematic Islamically, and most people would try to stay away from them. Unfortunately, there's no pure 100% halal option. I think this is for the business people in here. This is an area where we need real financial innovation, Islamic fintech type stuff to really come up with a solution here. Because there isn't. However, Utah and certain other states have good 529 plans that are all equities that where you can get the closest you can. And then there are formulas that, people like Joe Bradford and other finance specialists can give you to sort of purify or halalify, income and, any interest income that might have come your way. Um, some of the other things that you mentioned earlier, like the UTMA, and even maybe Roth IRA. I'd never really thought so much about Roth IRA. You obviously have a lot more control over what those assets are, so you could build a Sharia compliant profile. The challenge is, as Sarah mentioned in one of the questions, the UTMA is counted as a student asset and it's assessed at 20% and so on. And so it's not as always as tax efficient certainly as a 529 type plan. But those are some of the questions. I think obviously, trying to find a college which you can graduate debt free is one of the biggest gifts that you can have. I mean, it's just dramatically different for a student who graduates, debt free versus someone who has this sort of mountain of debt. And we're just talking about undergrad here. There were a lot of questions about graduate school and so on, and the picture there for graduate school, depending on what type of school you're going to, is not, for these professional schools that so many of our families are interested in, medical school, law school, business school, that sort of thing. You're dealing with another huge tuition with many fewer financial aid type options. So saving as much as you can on undergrad tends to make a lot of sense. And just to underline one of the things Greg said, I think the single biggest lever you can pull involves having a college list, right? Building a strategic college list so that you have the Fairfield universities. I saw a lot of like the emojis come up when you were giving that particular example because it suddenly got real, and some people were asking like, hey, in Texas, what's a similar example? Like, you want to find the Fairfield universities, and that's what, people like Greg, like myself, like people who are in this, there are resources where we can find out like how what percentage of students at that school get not who don't qualify for need-based aid are getting merit aid, and you can really get a pretty clear picture of what you might want to be paying at different schools, and you just want to have options, right? I always say don't close doors before they're open. Of course, you don't really want to be in that situation that you mentioned where you get into your dream school, but then there's just no way to pay for it. But it's just good to have a lot of options, even for these playing some of the offers off of each other, and so on, which sometimes happens. That sort of like horse trading type stuff. It's good to have these big offers that you can get, and yeah, I think this topic's really I can see in some of the questions that you're dealing with pretty sophisticated people here who are really into it, asking about like changes, the big beautiful bill, how that's affected how that's affected things with 529s and eligibility and all sorts of things like that. So this topic is vast and very there's a lot of nooks and crannies, but hopefully that gives something. With the last thing I'd say, and this is sort of, to put sort of an Islamic twist on this, there's a beautiful story in the Quran, also in the Bible, of Sayyidina Moses, when he was, in the desert, and the Prophet Shu'aib, he had those two daughters that were there, and essentially, as the Quranic story goes, that Sayyidina Musa was offered to, he could work for 8 years, and if he agreed to do that, then he could marry one of the daughters. And so this is something that I've seen some Muslim institutions actually do, where in order to avoid the interest paying loan, an employer, a wealthy benefactor, some other people will actually sponsor a child to participate, to go to university, pay the funds, avoid the interest, and so um, on the condition that that person then works for them. There's a interesting company called Definance, DEFY, like Defy Nance. That's sort of looking into some of those things. There's a continuous charity. Someone put this in the chat. Definitely check out a continuous charity. They have a system where they're paying off college. It's sort of like it's called a continuous charity because you all the money that they get, they're constantly recycling through it. So they're paying for people's tuitions, and then once that gets paid, the money comes sort of back in, and so they've saved millions and millions of dollars of interest payments. Unfortunately, it's sort of putting a band-aid over a knife wound, as I said earlier. It's the need is so great, even just within our community, that these organizations can only support so many students. And that's where the strategic application and the merit stuff can be such a big game changer. Um, but thank you so much. I just wanted to, as I mentioned in the beginning, I wanted to just share a little bit more about what we do here at 5 Before College, and then maybe we'll have some time for some summative final thoughts from you, Greg, and Sarah. So let me just pull this up. Um, so the core thing that we do at 5 Before College is obviously work with students in those 5 years before college. So our sort of the students we work with are typically in the eighth through the 12th grade, and that's sort of the time when things get real. And before we talk about paying for college or applying to college, you really need to have more of a sense of who you are and what you want to do, what impact that you want to have on the world. And so we have a beautiful concept within Islam, or called the Qibla. And so as we all know, the Qibla is the direction towards Mecca, towards the Kaaba. And I remember from the early days of when I first became Muslim, you put the prayer mat out, and it actually had like the compass built into it, and you'd figure out which direction you had to go to find the Qibla. So metaphorically, we all have a Qibla inside of us. We all have sort of a North Star. We have something that we were uniquely put here in this world to do. And that's really what the college experience is all about. We really want to discover more about what unique contribution we want to make to the world while we're still young, while we're in high school, so that then when we go off to college, we can make the most of this investment, however much it ends up costing. So after having literally thousands of conversations with Muslim families, we realized that this was the main pain point. Our kids feel a lack of purpose. They don't really know why it all matters. They're working hard, but they don't have some greater sense of purpose. And that's why we launched this Find Your Qibla program. And alhamdulillah, it's been really successful. We have close to 200 students go through the program. It's an 8-week program. The first half is really about introspection, finding your qibla, doing deep dive into who you are and what you want out of the world, developing, and the second half is translating that vision for, what you want in your future to a specific tangible project. We call it the Saturday morning project, a passion project, a signature project that you're so excited to work on that you're willing to sacrifice the thing which teenagers love more than anything else, namely their sleep. They wake up early on a Saturday morning to work on it, and so on. So we've had students who have created podcasts, created small businesses, launched charities, other all sorts of other initiatives that are deeply entwined into who they are. So the Qibla concept, it's really that intersection of these four things: what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the ummah needs, what the ummah needs. When we can build a life that's built around these things that we love, that we lose track of time doing, things that we're good at, that people praise us for, that people come to ask us for advice about, things that we can be paid for. Because look, we're this whole talk was about paying for college. Our kids are gonna have to pay for their kids someday. Like, it's okay and it's halal and it's good and it's important to make money. And what's the point of going to these colleges if we're not going to earn the money ourselves, right? But then the missing piece with so many people's lives, so many people who get sucked into the corporate world and the golden handcuffs and so on, is what the ummah needs. Imagine building a life around that. It took me 45 years, I'll be honest, to build a life where I sort of found my qibla. Everything else that I did was missing in one of those areas, right? It was missing in the financial side, or it was when I worked in finance, when I worked in Islamic finance, it was missing in sort of like the what I love. It wasn't something that I love. It was only when I started my own thing and doing this work that we're doing right now of helping inform the American Muslim and the global Muslim world about this college stuff, that I feel fully alive and I feel, fully in that center of the Qibla. And that's what we want for your kids starting now. So we have Find Your Qibla. We run cohorts 4 times a year. We do winter, spring, summer, and fall. So our spring cohort is starting just in about less than 2 weeks, April 12th. And it's mostly full, but there are a handful of spots left. We have a lot of interviews already lined up. If people are interested in that, you can scan that QR code, or I can drop this and put it in the chat. If I can find the chat. Uh, so you can just click that link. What it does is it's a short application form that allows you to give us some background information about who you are and what you're interested in. And then at the end, you'll be able to schedule an interview. And the interview will either be with myself or with Brother Patrick, who's our sort of director of admissions. And we get to meet both the parents and the student. The core of that interview is talking directly to the student to make sure that this is something that they're genuinely interested in, and so on. And alhamdulillah, we've had great results. We also we have an exciting summer coming up. Our Find Your Qibla summer cohort. For people who space maxes out in the spring or the summer's a better time. That's starting on July 5th. So that's going to go essentially across July and August. So that tends to be our biggest cohort of the year because summer is a time when people are free. We're also planning our first ever live event in Boston, sort of the weekend after the 4th of July, where we're going to do some Muslim campus tours of Harvard and MIT and just bring together a really high powered group. It's a chance for us to meet a lot of these students that we've only known behind a Zoom screen live, but also to invite the wider public to benefit from this type of environment that we have right here, but in real life. And then we also do the college essay boot camp. So the college essays are obviously a huge part of this thing. This is something I've been helping kids with for 2 decades, and so we've developed a really tight 5 day intensive to help you get your college essays done over the course of the summer. This is something that's included for the students who are part of our Find Your Qibla Squared, our long-term support program, but it's also something that we do open up for the public who are looking for more targeted support in that. And then, of course, we have people like Greg who we can connect you with, who offer other services, whether it's SAT prep or AP prep or other things like that. So, since we had so many people here who are brand new to us, I wanted to mention that. So if anyone has any questions about any of that, you can drop those in the Q&A as well. But I think that's just about it. Anything, Sarah, I know you've been manning the Q&A. Are there questions that keep coming up or anything that either of us could maybe address?
Yeah. So lots of just amazing questions, and you're absolutely right. People have like very sophisticated questions. Everybody's thinking it's very clear that, even with the Menti polling, Menti, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Menti.
Yeah, which is a really cool tool. Um, even if folks were saying, "Oh, I have no idea where to start. I'm at the beginning," it doesn't really seem like that from all of these questions. So, it's just great to see everybody so engaged. So something I noticed, kind of a trend of, I saw some in the chat and some in the Q&A. And this is kind of where my day-to-day lies right now in wrapping things up with our graduating seniors. A lot of people just wondering like, hey, is it okay to go back and negotiate? Like, how do I go back, and not feel like I'm just, asking for something that they don't want to give me, or, should I go to this school where a sibling is at and there can be a discount? And I think, my best piece of advice for those who are really in the thick of it, and your child or children, they're graduating this year from high school and they're ready, they have their offers in hand. It's absolutely well within your right to go back to the financial aid offices and just talk, have a conversation, initiate a conversation with folks, because at the end of the day, they are just people who want to enroll dedicated, talented students, right? I think a lot of, we see a lot of families maybe have some hesitancy about going back and everything. College is really expected at this point in time. It's again well within your own prerogative to do that. It doesn't hurt your child's admissions chances. They're not going to take away their admissions. They're not going to rescind any of their financial aid that they already have. And honestly, the worst that they can say is no. At the end of the day, having worked in a variety of financial aid offices myself, like they're just people there and they want to have, nice, respectful conversations. So as long as you approach it like from a human, standpoint, which I'm sure everyone here would, it's totally well within your control to advocate for your student and to advocate for yourselves. And if something feels off with the offer, or you think this can't possibly be right, they're there to walk you through it. We're happy to do a consultation with you even at this point, if you are in kind of the home stretch of things. So a lot of good questions again about loans, about, how do I strategize about my Roth IRA and all of that. We do also, Greg, I don't know if you did want to mention any of the financial planning stuff that we do, but again, we can always have those conversations offline with folks, and direct them to appropriate resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I add there. I mean, I think you highlighted a few points there, but on the appeals, I mean, there is an art to it, though. I think that that's
Sure.
something where what you convey, how you convey, can have a difference on the success of it. So, being thoughtful about it is important. Not just give me more money. It's got to be done in a much strategic way, especially if there's extenuating circumstances that have affected
Yeah.
your finances. I mean, I think that's the most obvious way we see these. It's not the only way, but if there are changes to your financial picture, um, then the colleges will listen. There's something called professional judgment. That's what it's there for. So, it's worth asking the question and just having a conversation with, they're asking you for hundreds of thousands of dollars of protection.
Yes.
You have the right to ask questions,
Yes,
you know?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to think about it that way. I mean, we strive so hard, the students strive so hard to get into these schools, but you're the customer here. And so you can't forget that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think someone gave me good advice when I was younger that like with big decisions, when you're buying a house, like very few people try to do it all on their own. They realize using the real estate
Yeah.
agent makes a lot of sense. When you're dealing with these, really big financial decisions, it's usually makes sense to pay for professional advice. So I don't want to sound too salesy here, but there's a reason that our profession exists for independent
Mhm.
educational consultants, and I think when we do our job well, anything that you ever pay for any of our services, you get back many times over, a multiple back based on either the college results, these merit aid things, or sometimes it's more, a little more ineffable, but you get into these higher tier schools that have, long-term earning potential that probably will pay itself back many, many times over. Not to mention, the personal clarity and everything else that comes from the sorts of coaching that we do. So, I think it's something I'm really excited about because I don't think there are a lot of professional Muslim organizations that have contacts with people like Greg and Campus Bound and College Affordable and all these things, and it's a real mission of mine to connect, you know, this our sort of mini ecosystem that we have here to the wider sort of college prep world, so that we can continue to get even better results, specifically for our community, but so that we can continue to succeed. So yeah, it's been such a pleasure. I'm sure that a lot of people will be banging down your door. The one question which a lot of people are asking is sort of on my mind too, because I'd never really thought about Roth IRAs. Not to get into the weeds at the very end, but how might that work? Is that an sort of a workaround from this 529 issue that we're struggling with? Yeah, give us a little picture there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so the one thing about the Roths is that there's a limit on what you can put in every year. And so that's something you have to plan for. And the person has to contribute to a Roth, you have to have income. So you can't just have a student that's 9 years old, invest in a Roth for that student. Or so there are limits to it, but I believe there's much more flexibility that you have. And the if you're using that money for college for education, it's the same benefits as a Roth. There's a 529.
Mm. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, that I
But
want
but
to.
but once again, I would recommend highly that whether it's somebody that we can connect you with, or if you have somebody already ask about the investment opportunities that are available to you under different Roth programs, and make sure that it fits your priorities.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. We said 90 minutes. We're close. We're at 100 minutes.
Pretty
So
good.
so that's pretty good by our standards. I appreciate everyone coming out. Like I said, we had over 900 people register for this. We had at any given time we had over 300 people throughout this event. Like clearly this is an important topic that this is not the only time we'll touch on it. We can continue to talk through these things and learn as much as we can to try to, be able to invest in our kids' futures and not just their, pad these colleges and so on. So, thank you so much, Greg and Sarah. I really appreciate it and look forward to continued collaboration, inshallah.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
very
much for
much. It's
having
great
us.
to be
Thank
here.
you. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.